Come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today. So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready. Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Oh, welcome to the vlog on the blog. Thank you, Rich. I appreciate having the drink there. A little ruby red grapefruit juice. You can't beat that early in the morning. We have as our special guest John today, and John is the host of the Gen Z gang. That is, you have to tell us the name of your show, but we're really excited to have it, and it required me to issue an apology, which I was delighted to be able to make. So tell us about your program on behalf of the website Yada Yada.
I'd like to say thanks for having me on today. And the title is still kind of a work in progress, but right now we're leaning towards Y to Z, and it's kind of reflective of both, millennials and Generation Z, as well as, kind of bringing knowledge to that group, Yada, right? And it's kind of an interesting broad overview of culture and how, it's starting, right? So it's kind of hard to say definitively what it is, but the hope is to kind of show our personal growth and journey. So like the first episode is a lot about our introductions and who we are and how we got here and why we're here. And we kind of want to expand into the things that are kind of relevant to younger people today. I find that while there are certain people who are, say, in our generation that are exceedingly religious or political, the generalized person is probably not so much. They're kind of their own thing. Like in a way, one of the things that like the left kind of got right was intersectionality. There's a lot of differences between people, right? And these subcultures kind of make us very unique insofar as our generation. And I think kind of exploring that and contrasting it with the Torah would be an interesting way of kind of going about that. It's going to evolve, and we'll kind of see how that becomes in the future. But we have tons of ideas that we're looking forward to exploring.
Yeah, there is a interesting situation, I think, particularly with Gen Z, where there are subcultures, and most of the subcultures are not particularly helpful. The generation became overtly Marxist, which is deeply troubling, because what it says is that either their teachers or they themselves are unaware of history. They have not had the opportunity, of course, that I had, which is to spend considerable time behind the Iron Curtain, actually in Soviet Russia and in Red China, long before the enterprise zones, back in the time that, within weeks of the time that Nixon made it legal for a Westerner to travel there. And not seeing that contrast, really have no idea that how dysfunctional Marxism is, and how ultimately concentrations of power within any institution or government or military turn the potential of decent people bad, and it happens all the time. So it's a shame to see so many Marxists. It's also a shame that it is a generation that has largely formed alliances, as did the Marxists during the last World War, with Muslims. And you have this hypocrisy in the generation, and it's pervasive. It doesn't mean that everyone suffers from it, but it certainly is pervasive. We got a pretty bad noise that is in the headset here, Rich, that I would love to have resolved if we can get it done. But affinity for Islam and Gen Z in particular, in colleges and in streets, parading around, promoting Muslims on behalf of a Fakistan and a place called Palestine. It's just so hypocritical. You could not have more divergent belief systems than Marxism and Islam. And the whole thing is based on a lie. So it says that we're going to college, but we're not getting educated because we haven't a clue as to what the world is actually like or what its history has been, or that it's not. Jews have never been colonizers, nor have they ever imposed genocide or apartheid. And the Muslims they want to empower are the worst in human history at imposing genocide and apartheid. And so you have a generation you can't talk to about this because they're convinced that their belief system is valid and inspired and enlightened when it's completely irrational and ignorant. So it's a very frustrating situation to be against. And then you have another whole subculture, John, that is particularly young men that are into gaming. And I saw that I'm too old for internet games. They came out when I was in my 20s, and I was already working and didn't have time for them. But I saw my sons grow up with them, and I saw how addictive they were. And I also saw the moral issues of first-person shooter games where your goal is to wipe a bunch of people out, and then if you get killed, you get to reboot and start all over again. And it just looked to me like this is going to drive some really bad behavior. Then when we came up with drones and we had game operators operating drones and killing people for real, I knew we were in trouble. And then, of course, we've had so many of the assassinations recently perpetrated by gamers. They're not able to separate real world from the world where they're spending so much of their time. And then you see this was the first generation to be brought up under a very prevalent social media environment where influencers are king and AI is creating content. And you realize that 90% of the content is unreal. It's fake. And much of what is being promoted has no correlation with reality. And it's deprives so many people of personal interactions so that they can effectively communicate and get along with one another. And so it's the tendency is to see those compartmentalizations, all of which are real, all of which are very deeply entrenched in the generation, and still hold out hope that there are notable exceptions. Which is why when I saw your the test of your first program, I said, "Oh wow, I'm going to have to eat my words and apologize and say there are exceptions, and there are many of them, and they're very bright and thoughtful. But how in the world did you survive that gauntlet and get to where you are, John?"
I've thought about that a lot, specifically how I came to get where I am, and it's a lot of luck, it's a lot of I don't know if it's serendipitous or whatever, for instance, for me to end up where I did specifically, it's like my parents had to have separated when I was a kid, and then I would have had to have moved to a new part of the city and been at this particular school to meet these particular people so that I forged these particular relationships, and all of these things kind of unfolded in this way. And I ended up living with my girlfriend and her parents, and I never would have met her if all of these weird serendipitous things wouldn't have happened, and chances are I probably wouldn't have found this where I did. So it's interesting to kind of put it as the how. I honestly couldn't tell you. It's a lot of, I feel like, random chance, and maybe I don't know, some people like to talk about fate. I don't know how much of fate's into that, but surviving necessarily the gauntlet of ideological possession, I guess I should call it, is it's not easy for a young person. You're exposed to everything all the time, and there's really no filter. You can take in anything you want to, and it's a good filtering mechanism, I guess. You know what I mean? You kind of self-select into whatever you want and out of whatever you want. And when I was a high school student, I was exceedingly political. I was part of an enrichment program, and I kind of talk about this on our show a little bit, and it was very left wing, and I was very left wing because of that. And once I got out of high school, I kind of started just looking at whatever, and I found an exceedingly kind of right wing place and spent some time there, and it kind of flipped. And I was, and over like a span of a year.
They aren't very different.
No, they're not. And
concentration of power, whether it is under fascism or socialism, it is exactly the same beast. It's control of everyone's lives and the economy by concentration of power. So right wing and left wing are the exact same beast under different names. And I think there's a terrible tragedy in debate today with Marxists opposing fascists, and with the far right, who won't call themselves fascists, but the far right opposing Marxists. They don't know it's the same genre. I mean, Adolf Hitler and Mussolini were both Marxists before they came upon the name fascist, which Mussolini invented because he couldn't differentiate his group against other groups of Marxists, and as such, he decided, well, we can rebrand ourselves fascists, and he came up with really snappy looking logos and uniforms and the like.
Yeah, he had Hugo
and Hitler
Boss.
was so Hugo, when particularly in Nazi Germany, Hugo Boss was the man with the dress code for the SS and all of them. And so you're looking at two men who are both Marxists, who both reposition themselves as fascists for no other reason than marketing.
Yeah, for sure. And it was interesting too, because I came to this point where I kind of realized it was horseshoe theory. You know, I just kind of ended up back in the same spot that I began, but it was just a different flavor of identity politics, essentially. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it was interesting because I had to unlearn a lot of the stuff that I started to reteach myself. And I think that sort of conditioning is difficult for a lot lot of people. You know, yes, what I mean?
It is. It's harder to unlearn things than it is to learn things.
Yeah, for sure. You know,
it's why the Torah and the prophets focus more on helping us unlearn religious and political lies than they actually do trying to teach us the truth. Because if you can't do both, I think we're having a camera that's having its own special life there as to whether it wants to come in really close or move far away. But we'll get her under control. We actually have an entirely new studio setup here that we worked on late last night. And it is so much better if we get the camera to cooperate with us. But Rich is going to lose endorsements for his tiny camera if he can't get it under control. But there you go. I think that's better. You mentioned something, John, that very few people have discussed. And you're not old enough, I don't think, to go back to my Shattering Myths days where I talked about this a lot. Well, now he's lost control of his mini cam again. He may have to go with the teleprompter cam, and I'll have to put it to bed for a little while. In that, the progressives didn't exist at the point I was doing the Shattering Myths show, and there was no mention of something called woke, and no one was trying to cancel culture. What there was is political correctness. And the purpose of political correctness was to recast reality in a means that was more fitting for those who were far left on the political spectrum. And one of the things that I said routinely is that there's a lot of ways to control people's minds, but ultimately you get down to two. And this played deeply into the mindset behind political correctness that was very pervasive in America from the early 1970s through about 1990, at which time it gave way to other titles. But the two ways are you control access to information. And that happens a lot. When I was in Russia and China, they controlled access to information. The internet's made that a lot harder, but you know, I'm older than the internet. So what they did is they just controlled access to information, so that you can tell somebody any manner of lies, and they will never know the difference if you prevent access to information. It's how the Roman Catholic Church and Christianity fooled so many people for so long. is they controlled access. You couldn't even read the New or Old Testament. You were only told you had to listen to it in Latin, and you couldn't understand that. So there was no access to information. The second way, and this is what political correctness tried to do, is that rather than control access to information, you inundate people with information. You give them so much information, and it's so available that they can't process it, and then you go after judgment. You render judgment, being judgmental, a crime against society, and that anyone who is judgmental is hostile to society. But if you can't be judgmental, you aren't discerning, you can't filter information. And that filter is the essence of intelligence. It's the essence of morality. It's the essence of justice, is filtering the information. But political correctness manifest in the educational system and in society, particularly in the media, made being judgmental considered bad. And so they went off after being judgmental, and they had many ways of slandering it. But under that basis, what you now have is no filter, and you're inundated with information, which means it's just so overwhelming, most people just give up, and they will echo a political or societal or religious sentiment just so that they have some anchor, so that they're not completely adrift in the sea. And so when you mentioned no filter and too much information, that was by design. You were put in that position.
Yeah, certainly. It's very interesting in that regard, because if I do compare myself to the say the general person that I know in my generation, I would say it's not very common for them to be political. It's even less common for them to be religious. I don't mean political as in to have political ideology, because they do to some extent, but not necessarily like actively engaged in any sort of political manner. And it's very interesting, I find, because that these people, they don't really grab onto anything at all, and they are very it's like I mentioned before, they're very attached to culture. So it's just whatever kind of subculture they're into. Like you talked about gamers, yeah, I would kind of embarrassed him at the thousands of hours that I've wasted playing video games. Right?
It would be almost impossible for you to have grown up at that time in this culture and not be seduced into gaming.
Oh, for sure. And like to give you an example, like
particularly as a male.
Yeah, like and with internet access and say like piracy, for instance, like in the early 2000s when I was growing up, like I had access to any game I wanted to play.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like in this endless arcade where you can spend thousands of hours doing whatever you want.
Right. But I saw it with my sons, and I couldn't stop it. I was, my upbringing was that you're a guy, you play sports, and sports is your way to interact. It's your way to hone a skill. It's your way to show some discipline. It's a way to be part of a team and accomplish something together. Go out and be part of a sports team. I played every sport there was, and you didn't have to be good at it. You just had to, be one of the guys out there. Girls are really nice, and they're a whole lot more fun in person than they are when they're faked on a computer screen.
Yeah, for sure.
Go, and the only way you'll ever be comfortable around a girl is if you talk to a lot of them.
Oh yeah, you gotta.
They're scary if they're out there, and you're not interacting. But once you get to know them, they're fun to be around. Boy, I failed. No matter how hard I tried, it was that gamer culture is so addictive.
It really is, and I will say not all of it was 100% negative. Like you might think this is crazy, but I learned how to read and write because of video games, which might sound insane probably to
as
most
opposed
people.
To school.
But yeah, I was never really great at school, but I was playing like online games with my older brother and stuff like that, and I needed to be able to communicate with people, and like by the time I was really into it, like I had a larger vocabulary than most kids my age, because I'm playing all these different games and they're using all sorts of different words that, you're not really seeing like an 8 or 10-year-old use. And, so there was some benefit to it. I got really good at figuring out how to do puzzles and kind of like approximation of math. There's a lot of math involved with a lot of games. So I mean, it depends how you use it. It's like a tool with anything else, like the internet. Like you could use it to find this amazing blog.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You could also use it to waste all your time doing whatever.
Right. No, I would agree that there was a strategy involved in many of the games. I remember the first game that I was exposed to that had any substance was a game called Myst, M-I-S-T.
Yeah,
and
my dad used to play that.
Yeah, it was a very thoughtful game where you had to follow the clues and reason your way through a maze. And the mental challenge of it was kind of fun, but it was also addictive. And then my sons love the civilization games where you're choosing between resources and defensive structures and food and production and raiding and protecting and building things. And there was, of course, a real strategy that was involved in that. And then those games went online, and then they became more sophisticated. And there was a strategy in that. But of course, the most addictive games were the first-person shooter games, and I'm not sure they had any value other than to be really destructive of one's kind of moral compass.
The only positive I could think of that, if any, is like maybe like reaction time, But you could do a lot of other things in real life to train your reaction time other than playing a video game, for sure.
Yeah, but try to hit a curveball.
Yeah.
And baseball, that would be an example. Or catch a football as a wide receiver and not get crunched on the way down. Were my preferences over that. So you talked about a whole series of events that were almost like fate, where you were brought to this position, and had you not been brought to this position, you would never know Yahweh or have read the books at Yada Yahweh. What were the things that finally got you an introduction? Because really no one ever finds Yahweh or takes him seriously that isn't introduced some way.
So I actually came from the exact same place that Kevin did, which is interesting enough, the infamous armpit of the internet known as 4chan. And I found
known as what? Where'd 4chan. You come from, Kevin? Are you revealing something here on dirt on Kevin? Okay,
I thought that might have been common knowledge. I didn't realize I was throwing Kevin.
I've said it many times. I've said it many times. Yeah, no, it's good. Go ahead.
Oh, so what is it now?
4chan is a image board that is it's got a variety of different topics. You can talk about anything on there. There's a page for it, and most of it is vastly inappropriate. But certain things are kind of intellectual discussion. But one particular place I used to hang out was called Politically Incorrect, for politically incorrect reasons. And I found a thread on there that it was talking about Teruah. It was about a decade ago. I was about 17, I think, when I found that thread. And it was talking about the Teruah harvest. And this guy dropped his email, and basically this thread had a excerpt from the Or Light chapter of Yada Yada. And I read that, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. Because, I was very atheistic. And, that really put the seed in my head that I was like, okay, God definitely exists. Like, this math is just way too close for kind of to ignore. And, I exchanged emails with that guy. I talked to him for some time, and he ended up being an interesting duck, so to speak. And he told me that, there was these flying light orbs that were talking to him, and that he was one of the two witnesses reincarnated as John the Baptist. And I stopped talking to him after.
Wow, yeah, wow. I wonder what his drug of preference was.
I don't know, and I didn't want to find out. So I stopped talking to him, and I was reading stuff on the Bless Yahweh website, and I started listening to your Shattering Myths archives. I was listening to.
So you do know about Shattering Myths? Okay, wow.
Yeah, yeah. I've listened to I don't even know how many hours. So I've listened to you talk a lot.
Okay, yeah. What's interesting for those that don't know is you go back now probably 15 years ago, but for a better part of a decade, I did a syndicated radio show called Shattering Myths, 5 days a week, 3 hours a day. And we divided the show into 2 to 3 sections each show. And once was we did a version of this, but without images. We did a commentary on the news where I would read 20 newspapers a day, and I would take sections of a variety of different stories. And I would say, this is what they reported. Here's what's actually true. And this is how it applies to you and what it means going forward. And so I made a whole lot of predictions as to where things were going to go and had a tendency to get all of them right. And so that was kind of an interesting part of the show. And then we did another section of the show on Torah. Who is Yahweh? What is he offering? What is he asking in return? How do you become part of the covenant? What things like Teruah? What does it mean? And then we did a portion of the show exposing the truth about Muhammad and Allah and Islam. We had IQ Rasuli on the show a lot, and which is really an interesting fellow. And we knew more about the religion than anybody else by a long shot, so could speak very forcefully and accurately about it. But so, yeah, that was a show that I did for a very long time and enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was really cool.
But yeah, I guess to kind of continue from there is you had a guest on at one point who is no longer on this earth, and he had mentioned, like, I didn't even know what your name was. I just knew he was Yada for a long time, and he'd be like,
"Oh yeah,
hey,
that's
Craig."
right."
And then I was like, "Oh, okay, the guy's name's Craig," and then it kind of went from there.
I worked anonymously for the first 10 years. I did this was anonymous,
and then I heard about the Facebook group that was on there, and then I kind of joined that literally like 2-3 weeks right before it imploded, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of an interesting development."
Yeah.
And,
what was that? What was the name of his Facebook? Something Truth.
That one was the Unpopular Truth.
Unpopular Truth. Yes. Larry actually wasn't his real name, nor was Hendricks, which he operated under. Both fake names.
Oh, I had no idea. That's actually.
Oh yeah, it was a fake name, fake life. Claimed that he was responsible for the translations. Made lots of claims to lure people in using my translations and insights, and then abuse them when they got there. So we had a very uncomfortable party, and we unfortunately we have a number of people that are still in the periphery that came out of that group that just can't get to go completely away. They're mostly away, but the difficulty is if you're really sucked into conspiracy, it's tough to get out. It's like leaving religion. Conspiracy will really suck you in, and the nature of it's addictive too, because most people don't have fulfilling lives. They're looking for someone to blame for their lives not being fulfilling or rewarding. Conspiracy gives them that, and conspiracy, it's the internal group is so focused on condemning any voice of reason that's opposed to them that you get into that same mindset, and they're dot focusers. So, like chemtrails, they'll see the airplane with the contrail and say, that's not normal. They're trying to poison us. And you point out, excuse me, but that happens to be the condensation that when you burn hydrocarbons, you get moisture in the air because the air is cold up there and it won't hold as much moisture. So it forms into a cloud. That's a process of the combustion in a turbine engine, and it's nothing more than that. But no, they're trying to poison us. You point out, okay, so you're going to say that the toxin is in jet fuel because that's what they're putting into those engines. So you're saying the toxin is in the jet fuel, and you want to say that the really clever plan they had, don't put the toxin in water, don't put it where in food or where people would actually put it up at 35,000 feet, and in parts per hundreds of billions. Yes, and have most of it just dispensed over unpopulated areas like the ocean, and that's your plan. That's what your government is doing, and everybody that owns an airplane is going along with this scheme of putting that toxic Jet A into their wings so that they can kill people. And yet nobody that flies the airplane seems to be affected by it. Secret vaccine, I guess, huh? Oh no, you can't have the vaccines because that's toxic too. So it's tough to get out of that. I'm glad you didn't spend much time in it, because the people that get into it, you can extricate yourself from it, but it's such a strong pull.
It is.
It pulls a lot of people right back in.
It's like it's kind of like a habitual liar. Like if a habitual liar wants to stop telling lies habitually, the first thing they have to do is like tell themselves to stop telling lies. And if they tell a lie, they have to turn around and be like, okay, that's actually not
Right.
that's not the truth. You know, you have to kind of reparent yourself if you're kind of in that situation, whether you're religious, political, conspiratorial, or whatever it is, you know.
And
It
almost
definitely,
all of them have a thing. It's they want to support their political party. They want to support their kid. Like the number of people that have autistic kids and who may or may not even be autistic because I really don't have an effective test for it. But they want to blame vaccines because they certainly don't want to blame environmental issues. And since environmental issues seem to be the only thing it ever tests with a commonality to autism, that would mean they'd have to accept blame themselves. They don't want to do that. So they go after a vaccine and go that route. And so everybody has a conspiracy that serves their interests. You know, the idea of having the false flag operations where the Boston Marathon bomber and Sandy Hook and all that sort of thing were all government plots. So there weren't real people; they were just actors. That's all to promote a political agenda. If you get down to it, they all have they want to put all those people on the liberal side, and they're on the conservative side. So it's a piling on of lies and an inability to see the whole picture. There are those that don't want to accuse Islam of being responsible for 9/11, even though they were all Muslims, even though they're all screaming Allahu Akbar, and they want to say that it was a government plot. So the government that did this to you, which you think is completely corrupt, was able to cover up their involvement and actually fake flying planes into buildings and get everyone to believe it. If the government was really that smart, they wouldn't need to go to a plot like this to influence you, would they?
No.
But you've got it's just so many insane conspiracy, flat Earth. Think about how out of touch with reality you have to be to believe in flat Earth.
Yeah, a $15 Estes rocket from Walmart and a pin cam in that sucker for $35. You can verify the Earth is round for yourself. You know,
or they even 9/11 as a conspiracy where there weren't planes that flew into the buildings that were hijacked by. To believe that and to promote it, you just have to be so out of touch with reality that. And by promoting it, what you're doing is saying that I have no credibility. I'll never have any credibility in my life. There's no reason to even try to reason with me because my mind is a vacuum. It's just a useless place where I tell myself that I'm the truther.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd rather try to deal with a religious person than a conspiratorial person if you were trying to reason with them. You can't reason with either, but
yeah, at least a religious person has some sort of basis, whereas a conspiratorial person will just kind of make up whatever they need to justify it.
Yeah. So I keep interrupting you on your way to the story. So you
yeah, no worries.
A couple of weeks in Unpopular Truth, and said that blew up, and but you were reading, and what you read resonated with you.
Oh, for sure, you know, and. You know, back then too, because it was so different from what I had essentially internalized. It was a very emotional experience going through all that, you know, because it's you're unlearning a lot of the essentially the bad ideas that you had, and you're kind of introduced to these different concepts. And it was a pretty amazing journey. Like, I'm not the best student in the world. It took me a long time to read what I have, and you know.
Well, you learned to read playing online games, so
yeah. So you know, at least
in fact, your reading is pretty impressive.
Taking steps in the right direction, right?
Yeah, and you're not exactly reading light material.
No,
the Or Light chapter is not only intense and written at a way beyond graduate school level, both in vocabulary and the logic that is deployed, way beyond what you would read in a graduate classroom textbook. It relies on concepts that are so far beyond most people's willingness to think, because it's something we've come now full circle back to, because light is the most essential concept in understanding who we are and who Yahweh is, where we are, and where we potentially have to go. Because you look at all religions, they're focused on, the physical body. Yahweh's not. He's focused on light and energy. That's why the Moed Mikre have you approach the fire during them, because the fire transforms physical, organic, and decaying physical material into light and energy, which is a huge increase in capacity. You can do far more with energy than you can with matter. And that by having that transformation from matter to energy, you're released from this planet. You can go travel the universe now for the first time. You can be eternal. You are so much more enriched and empowered and enabled, emancipated, if you will, through that process of E equals MC squared. And it explains the nature of prophecy and why Yahweh never got any one of them wrong, because he was never predicting the future. He had seen it, because on a photon of light, all time exists simultaneously. So he could witness our future and our past and simply report it to us, so that he was credible in that process. He explained how he can exist in 7 dimensions and create a 6-dimensional universe. And it explained precisely what he's trying to do with us. And it even explains that first prophecy, the one in the Torah, Bereshith 1, of the 2 luminaries, a greater and lesser luminary, and the influence they're going to have in fulfilling the Moedim. And the consequence of the Moedim is that those who take advantage of them become like light and energy. You're empowered and enriched in this manner. It's the benefit of the covenant is to become like light. And it's the antithesis of religion. In Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, there's bodily resurrection. Well, that's going in the wrong direction. You can't be immortal, can't get in, can't leave the planet. You're not going to be anything more than worm rot if that's your choice. And so you started with some very interesting material that I had always hoped would appeal to agnostics and atheists, because it was so rational.
Yeah, it was. It resonated exceedingly with me. That was definitely the number one thing that kind of pushed me in, for sure. And luckily enough for me, it was, excuse me, the first thing that I encountered. And I think it's particularly interesting talking about that section in particular, because a decade ago when I had read it, it was already very layered and intricate and kind of prophetically beautiful. And now with the developments that you found in the last year, it's exceedingly, I don't know, delicious.
It is delicious. I like that. It's delicious. Yeah,
cool.
You really have to have an elastic, open mind to appreciate it being delicious, or either that, or having been here and been inquisitive and open-minded for a long period of time. But once you realize the whole way that the whole story fits together, and you come right back full circle to that light chapter that you read so long ago, that is really the essence of the whole thing. And when you recognize that our very souls exist dimensionally beyond the 3D realm that we're stuck in. That's why science can't measure them. They can't quantify them. They don't know what they are, because it exists a dimension beyond where we are here. And that, coupled with light, gives us enormous opportunity. It's just, you can live forever. You can go explore the universe. You can cohabitate with Yahweh in the 7th dimension. You can be creative. You can actually bend matter with your mind and words. It's just such a marvelous thing. And for God then to say, I'm going to take some souls that I'm comfortable working with. You may not like them. It doesn't much matter to me, but I can rely on them. They've proven they're reliable, if anything else. And I'm going to work with these souls in the most difficult situations. And we're going to move the entire story towards the conclusion that I want, which is a second chance for humanity and a return to the garden for 1,000 years. And the reason I'm so glad to have you on the show is that I would not want to be in a position where everybody that was part of the tutorial group, the group that's responsible for administering these people, to have gray hair. I just wouldn't. Because I think that the majority of those that are going to be allowed in, and I noticed you've lost more of your hair on the top of your head than I have.
Yeah, I get confused
older than you,
Shannon sometimes.
Yeah, you and Shannon, but it's obvious to me that the majority of the mortal remnant that permeates the Garden of the End, they're going to be sub 30, and many are going to be sub 25. And it shouldn't be all older guys and gals that are trying to work with them. There is value of being a father figure, but you don't need 12 father figures, right? You need some brother figures and all of that.
You definitely don't want to have too many cooks.
Yeah, so I'm happy being a father figure, but I'm not going to be a very good brother figure to a bunch of young people that are all in their late teens and early 20s. But you could be a brother.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And
I kind of think about
that's what they need.
lot.
Yeah, mentoring them at more from where they are. I love the cat Wookie. I'm not sure would, but the cat's cool. We're a pet friendly program, as you know.
Yeah, I've got two. The other one's he's not here at the moment, but this guy's always.
Is that a guitar behind you?
Yeah, I got a Takamine. Oh, other shoulder. I got a Takamine G series back there. So
yeah,
it's a pretty decent guitar. I play a little bit of guitar. I'm not the greatest, but
you want to play something for us?
Oh man, the thing is, I haven't picked it up in so long. It'd be really
out of tune and everything else. Okay, all right. I thought it was handy there that you'd be ready to pick it up and strum some for us.
It's more like a set piece right now, but I'll start practicing.
It's a set piece.
Yeah,
I was speaking for Rich. Rich is the guitarist. In fact, he would know if you were a guitarist or not a guitarist, because he used to make his living as a guitarist.
Yeah, I learned a little bit of classical in high school.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I cut Rich off there.
But I had a Takamine.
Yeah.
I love those. I had a Japanese Takamine, so those are really nice guitars.
Yeah. So when he knows the brand of your guitar and had one, and you can even cite where it was made, you know he's the real deal.
Yeah, for sure. I just embarrass myself if I played any music for anybody, because it's been so long. I might be able to play like the first couple lines like for release, but that's about it.
At your age, I had a guitar that I put on display in my house too, because I thought it made me look cool. Couldn't play it, but nonetheless,
it does make you look cool.
It does make you look cool having a guitar. So I had one. I had one too. And what's your impression now that we have now kind of moved away from social media? Not kind of, really. And have clustered around a website that we have tried to make like social media with all of the benefits without being in the swamp anymore.
I like it personally. I've never really been a big social media dude. I kind of came back to, oh my gosh, this cat just won't leave me alone. I came back to social media after you started posting on Facebook. Before then, I was just kind of avoided it. Like I'm a young dude though, so I'll watch like YouTube videos, and like I said, I used to spend a little bit of time on 4chan or whatever, but I don't really spend time doing that much anymore. Maybe still YouTube, but social media, no. It's either YouTube or the Yada Yada website for me, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm like you. I've completely given up on X and Facebook. I've spent no time. You're going to see that we're going to go through the blog from Facebook, but I have a Facebook page that I don't promote it with anybody. We may have 50 people that frequent it, and it's only because we list it on the website. So if you're going to be on this show, you can click on that and you can read the posts that we're going to talk about in the news, so that you're not surprised by them. But I just became so uncomfortable with it. It is so unreal, so fake, so managed by AI that are deliberately trying to promote anti-Semitism, racism, Islam, Marxism, MAGA. I would say that 90% of the posts that you have to filter through on Facebook are inaccurate and condescending and misleading. They're just horrible, and X is worse. And so I just gave up on them. I do, like you, spend some time on YouTube almost every night. I'll watch an hour of YouTube, and it's because I'm trying to stay current on what's happening in the White House, what's happening in Iran, what's happening with Israel, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening with Russia, what's happening in Europe, what's happening with China, what about currencies and the like. And I like astronomy, so I try to stay attuned to what the theory of the day is on the universe really isn't as we once thought it was. Actually, the universe is exactly as I said that I thought it was when I wrote the opening chapters of Yada Yada. I said that, I'm quite convinced that the universe is older than the 13.8 years that they're suggesting. I think that 15 billion years is probably a better number. I think that they evaluated quark confinement when energy transition to matter and time started to be counted. And I said, I think the size of the universe is considerably larger, that we just have galaxies that are retreating beyond our place now to notice them. So Webb, and that there wasn't a single Big Bang, that all of the energy for the entire universe wasn't in a single spot. But there was a Big Bang. It's just that it happened everywhere and simultaneously. Almost everything that I wrote and said, I think this is going to be true. This was, 20 years before Webb. And it turned out all to be true. At least it's the best explanation of what we're finding with Webb. It's kind of nice to find some gratification in knowing that you're we're ahead of the curve in that regard. So you
talking about social media. I said, John and I were just talking this morning about it. I was like, hey, John, did you go to, the Yada Yada and kind of look through the blog posts or whatever? And he's like, yeah, I did. I can't see like a 70% of them because he's in Canada. So that they can't, the Canadian government filters what they can and can't see on
really
on Facebook.
On Facebook?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
The government decides. So they have some algorithm, an AI that's monitoring what you can and cannot see.
Yeah. So if I go and check out pretty much, I'd say like this morning, I looked about half the things you share rather than I can see your comment when you share it. But as for what you're actually sharing, I just got a blurb of text that says that this content is not available in Canada. So it's kind of useless for me to even try to stay up on the news sometimes. Like if I want to see what's going on.
We will show that we're going to go to the news now. We'll show you that what I commented on. I will tell you that 90% of what I comment on, I am criticizing it. So the Canadians would be wrong in the sense that I'm not promoting that content. It's Facebook that sent me the feed promoting it. I didn't go looking for it.
I don't know if
Facebook promoted it, and I'm pointing out why it's wrong.
I don't know if it's necessarily that from my end. I think it's that we had a law passed, something to do with like social media and the influence of news or something like that. And as a response, Facebook essentially had made it so that you can't share. Sorry, cat's walking on the keyboard. You can't share certain news in Canada. I think it's kind of a mix between Facebook policy as like a retaliation for something the Canadian government did, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Wow. Yeah, it's again, if you can't get people not to be able to think rationally about information, you preclude information. There's two ways of controlling people. Oh, you can also control them by giving them bad information, which is pretty much all social media is now. It's a conveyor of bad information. They want to rail against the fake news. And, as an expert on a number of subjects, anytime that a subject that I'm an expert on is presented in the media, you listen to Shattering Myths, I can tell you that the majority of what is written by the journalist is wrong. And they can be wrong for a lot of reasons, but it's usually wrong. But in social media, the percentage of wrong to right is overwhelmingly worse. So I want to try a few. Kevin, want to bring up some news, and we'll test John's shattering myths aptitude?
Absolutely. Let me get set here.
Okay, so you'll actually be able to see what you couldn't see. You'll have to be on the show more often. You'll be able to see what Canada or Facebook is blocking here.
Yeah, I try to watch it every day, so it helps keep me up to date.
Yeah. So this one is that Trump on the White House lawn is saying that if you are opposed to him bombing Iran, then you must be in favor of Iran having, he would say, really evil people, really nasty evil people having a bomb. So the choice is that you don't bomb Iran and they have a really nasty people have a bomb, or you bomb them and, well, then you're going to prevent them from having a bomb. So my point is, first of all, the question that he's raising, are you in favor or against Iran having a bomb, is not only the wrong question to be asking, but who is to decide? Who made him the decider of whether or not a nation can have a nuclear deterrence? And
well, and the other side of that is why hasn't Iran used a bomb yet? You know, if they're lunatics.
Right, if they're lunatics and they wanted a bomb, and they've been in a position the last 20 years to compile the ingredients they already have into a bomb, why over the last 20 years, when they hadn't been attacked, have they not produced or deployed a bomb, if the only way to preclude them from having a bomb was to attack them? Because in the last 20 years, you hadn't attacked them and they didn't have a bomb. Well, why isn't there a journalist that can fire back at him and say, you're making it sound like your attack on Iran is what precluded them from having a bomb, when for the last 20 years, they've been in the position where they could have had a bomb at any time, and they didn't develop one. So your attack on them didn't have any influence on whether or not they would have a bomb or not. And in fact, now that you have bombed them, you've increased the likelihood that they will have a bomb by, many, many times. Your rationale is stupid, sir, Mr. President.
Right. We killed the one guy that had a fatwa against them, Iran having a bomb. That absolute nonsense.
Correct. And
if anything, we pushed them closer.
Oh, absolutely. There is no chance now that Iran won't have a bomb. By attacking them the second time, you have made it certain that Iran will have a bomb. And had you not attacked them, it was certain that they would not have had a bomb. And I say that understanding that the only reason for them enriching uranium to up to 60% purity in uranium-235 was so that they could build a bomb, but they didn't. And there's no indication that they would have used a bomb if they had developed one. But now they know that they have to develop a bomb just to keep you awake, because they aren't lunatics, sir. I've listened to their positions. They're saying you're not. And you're a lunatic with a bomb. So shouldn't we be more concerned about keeping you from being able to fire nuclear bombs than we are worried about the Iranians?
Yeah, the only country in history to have attacked another country with a nuclear weapon. Who's the lunatics?
I think we need to go with the other camera, and it's the lighting's wrong. Everything is wrong. Let's just go with the other. Let's go with the switch to the teleprompter camera, please. Okay, let's just switch to the teleprompter camera and give up on the little guy for a while, and then we'll try to figure it out later, because it's just nowhere. It's been bad the entire program. Okay.
We're going to edit that out, he says.
I don't know. He took the teleprompter camera out, so we don't know what the issue is with all of that. I think that's the teleprompter camera. All right, so let's go to our next slide, by the way. Oh boy. So this influencer, who has, by the way, a nice taste in mics. He's got a Shure 7B. That's good taste in mics. He has absolute proof that Jesus is the Shabbat. He says, is it Shabbat day Saturday or Sunday? First of all, if you're asking the question if the seventh day is Saturday or Sunday, then you're not very smart. Okay,
right.
It's 7, right? Sunday is the first day of the week. Saturday is the 7th day of the week. You have to be an ignoramus even to ask your question, is the 7th day the 7th day or the first day?
Yeah.
All right, so let's just start there. So now you have an influencer that's too stupid to know numbers up to 7. That's probably a really bad start on his take here. But nonetheless, that's what he promoted. But he says, no, I can quote the New Testament and I can prove that Jesus is the Sabbath. Hey, idiot. Your New Testament can't even prove that Jesus existed.
Yeah.
And he most certainly was not the Sabbath. He never said he was the Sabbath. He never existed. And the New Testament made him up. So please, turn out the lights. Turn off the camera. Be stupid on your own.
First 14 books, they don't even quote the imaginary Jesus, So how do we know that what Jesus said anything about the Shabbat?
Yeah, the first 14 books were all written by Paul. They were written between 52 CE and 66 CE. And they never quote a single line from Jesus, and they attack the Torah as pornography. Those are the ones written by Paul, and the next 3 books were all written around 75 CE, 40 years after the fact, by people who are not eyewitnesses, who were part of Paul's posse. So here, you just have to be wholly ignorant of the evidence to be part of the idiots that are trying to deliver an audience in social media. So here again, I have two posts, as you can see here, John. Both posts, what I'm saying is the person speaking has no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, it seems to be a common trend on social media.
Yes. The majority have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, everybody's opinion is valid, right? No. You can have an opinion. It's not valid.
Yeah, they're not all equal.
So here, you could probably play this. What I want you to watch is the chemtrails coming from the back of these drones. So they're drones. They're all have exhaust trails coming from the back of them, the way that AI depicted them. So is the AI really that stupid? Stupid is a prevalent term here on this program. Is the AI that dense, that unaware, that it doesn't know there is no internal combustion engine on a battery-operated drone? So why did they depict the drones with exhaust trails behind them?
Very poorly manufactured lithium batteries.
Oh, okay. So the batteries were, just as they're beginning to discharge, they're smoking as opposed to combusting. I don't even know if they smoke, by the way, before they combust, but that is a good excuse. It's just that they would, if they were runaway batteries, they wouldn't be leaving smoke trails. They would be blowing up before they're supposed to blow up, and they would blow up probably in the tubes there. And oh, by the way, they wouldn't all blow up in the same way and leave the same trails behind them as they fly along. I just say that AI is not very smart, and operators may be less smart than the AI. And so it's just amazing what you see online, what is promoted. But the Chinese, they must be really clever.
Yeah.
So when these particular guys were pointing out the hypocrisy of Trump's defensive strikes. If you heard him yesterday, he said, okay, we didn't violate the ceasefire because, of course, we have negotiated an agreement. So you can't have violated the ceasefire if you negotiate an agreement, right? And so, no. Well, Americans, we don't do that kind of stuff. No, it was strictly defensive. The those crazy Iranians, they attacked our ships. And so all we were doing is a little defensive action, nothing else, nothing to see beyond it. So these guys say, wait a minute, you're boasting that you've destroyed their Navy, you've destroyed their Air Force, you've destroyed their entire military. How are you now dealing with a defensive strike? Wouldn't that mean they still have a military if they're attacking you, sir, Mr. President? But it goes beyond all of that because that's not what happened. The Iranians didn't fire at anyone. And they most certainly didn't fire at American military ships, causing American military personnel to respond defensively. That's not what happened at all. What happened is that 3 ships decided that, hey, we'll pay no attention to the Iranian blockade of the Straits of Hormuz. And we will sail our cargo out of the Straits of Hormuz. And so the Iranians fired warning shots way above them, way out in front of them, just to say, bad idea. Just giving you a warning here, bad idea. We've told you on the radio, don't do this. We've asked you to identify yourself. We've told you that you don't have clearance to go through. You can get clearance. We provide a lot of clearances for ships to go through. You don't have clearance. We do not know who you are. You're either going to turn back and we're going to fire these warning shots because you're not listening to us on the radio, or you're going to put your crew in jeopardy. Your call. And so they didn't fire at American personnel. They didn't fire at any ship. They tried to warn the ships. And so what America did then is it fired at and actually bombed southern Iran. So we attacked southern Iran, clear violation of the ceasefire agreement, and the Iranians did not violate the ceasefire agreement. And so the Iranians said, well, then we'll have to retaliate, and they sent missiles towards U.S. bases in Kuwait. That is what happened. No correlation between what's real and what's fake. And John, this really goes back to the Shattering Myths days, where you take a story and you unravel the story.
Yeah, I always thought that was one of my favorite parts of the show. Always was kind of, because for me, I was looking back a couple years in the past, listening through the archive, and kind of seeing, like, for instance, like I remember the first episode that I listened to was you were talking about like the Cypriot financial collapse, and kind of talking about how all of those systems move around and move forward, and it is very interesting. And a lot of things that you did talk about definitely happened the way that you had said, right? So it's very interesting looking back at some of the things that you said, for instance, like almost 16 years ago at this point.
Yeah, we'll have to do a show with you, since it's of interest to you, on currency manipulation, fiat currencies, and what the debt really is in a nation, and what it leads to, and what the timeline is for America, and what we should expect as a result of our enormous deficits, and how they're tied in with the petrodollar and the reserve currency, and what other nations are doing to work around that, and how this Iranian attack had such a devastating effect, not only on other nations' economies, but also on the underpinning of the whole reserve currency status through the petrodollar. So it would be a fun conversation, because it has such a profound effect on where we are inevitably heading. And the reason that you, as a younger person, were drawn to Yahweh is intellect and evidence and reason. And when you read something that was thoughtful, that was proven, well demonstrated, I like to use probabilities, and you talked about the numbers, the way the numbers fit. I like to use probabilities and improving points. That appealed to you, and that's what drew you in. Credibility is a powerful tool with a thoughtful person. And you can earn credibility, you can destroy it. That's why conspiracy is something I despise, because it is the great sinkhole that credibility goes into. It's why when you have nutcases like that Mother Goddess cult that got all up in their underwear over Mommy God Says, their whole purpose and hashtagging my name to disparage me was to rob credibility. And you spent a lifetime developing it. So that's really a nasty thing to do. Because of the background I've had in business and economics and travel around the world, I have a lot to say, and I've known the situation relative to our economic foibles and the difference between a gold-backed currency and fiat currencies and central banking and what they do and what quantitative easing is. What's wrong with America in terms of being able to actually manufacture things, while Trump's idea that I'm going to tariff other nations, as in they're taking advantage of us by making products more cheaply than we can make them in the United States. I understand why they're able to do it, and it has nothing to do with less expensive labor. And I understand supply lines. And so I think that if we had a show just devoted to it, with you having interest in it, that it would appeal to thoughtful individuals, because we can explain why we're in this mess and why there's no way out of this mess. Once you go down this path, there is no way to get out. It's like the Iranian war. Once you go down that path, there's no way out. And economically, the Iran war, and economically with our deficits, they're the same story. They are definitely related, and a huge part of why we're entering the time of troubles.
For sure. And it will definitely be something that's kind of particularly relevant for day-to-day life for people that will be here for that time. So it is definitely kind of an interesting place to speculate and kind of conjecture.
That's why I wanted to do the vlog on the vlog, is that I knew that what we did in Shattering Myths resonated with a lot of people who were very thoughtful. And that's the kind of people we're trying to encourage to think about God and become part of his covenant family, give up religion, give up politics, and learn the truth and capitalize on it. And so I thought that if we went back to that kind of a format, now that we have the visual capability of making it much more interesting, that a daily vlog on a vlog would, I love that the term's kind of fun too. I just thought there'd be a really an interesting way to draw people in that wouldn't otherwise. The moment we mention God, Yahweh, Torah, prophets, would turn off, saying it must be religious, not knowing that we're anti-religious. So.
Yeah, and anti-political. I mean, we have no problem telling you what's wrong with Marxists, and no wrong telling you what's wrong with MAGA. So,
you're right. You know, it's one of the posts that I have. We may not get to it, but it was a picture of AOC, and they're grooming her and to be the Republican or to be the Democratic candidate. And you're saying, you know, the reason that people that are so entrenched in the Democratic Party, who, you know, for lots of reasons, some good, some bad, despise Trump, and they despise Republicans. Both sides of the aisle, they're really extreme and against each other at this time. But the reason that they can't defeat the Republicans is because the core of the Democratic Party has become Marxist. And so the only people that can win the primaries are the most extreme. And so you have AOC and Bernie Sanders and the like as the front runners because they are Marxists. And you win an election by appealing to the undecided in the middle, that 20% of Americans that are not Republicans or Democrats, and Marxism does not appeal to them. Mm-hmm. So they're writing themselves out of success, and it bothers me because I would love to see Trump defeat. But you can't defeat him with Marxism. Okay, no. So this person it begins with a woman. This particular video, I don't know why it stopped at that point, but it begins with this woman who said, Abraham wasn't from Canaan. He came from Babylon. And it says, so me, she said, as a Palestinian, when I check my DNA, which I have done, then I'm more deserving of the land. Now, you wonder why I say that that Gen Z isn't smart enough to crawl out from under their own shadow. Okay, first of all, there is no such thing as Palestinian DNA. It's a naming convention based on an ethnic slur. There has never been a Palestinian. There will never be a Palestinian. There has never been a Palestine. There will never be a Palestine. There were Philistines. They were invaders from Crete. So they were your original Cretans. And they were vicious. They, you can't name, though, anybody from their culture that has a positive legacy on the world. You can't read anything that they believed in because they didn't have a writing system at the time. They built nothing, contributed nothing. They were robber barons as to what they were. And they invaded what we now call Israel from Crete. They became so vicious against Israel, they killed Israel's first king, wiped out his son, put Israel on the run. They were good at being bad. A lot of people are good at being bad. But when Dowd, who is David, finally rose to power, he took it to them and essentially defeated them. And they were never of any consequence thereafter. And then finally they were done in by the Egyptians, hammered them, a remnant of them much later, as did the Assyrians, as did the Babylonians. So there is no Philistine today.
And they didn't absorb them, did they? They didn't just absorb this population into them. They killed them because they didn't even make good slaves. So
right, that's because they were so vicious, and they were they couldn't educate them, they couldn't control them, and so typically in old cultures like that, look at Egypt, look at Syria, look at Babylon, they enslaved the conquered people. Alexander the Great did that routinely. They couldn't be effective slaves, so they just killed them. And so there is no such thing. It's not like they were absorbed into other cultures. They're just gone. There is no Philistine DNA. The name Philistine was used as an ethnic slur by Hadrian in 133 CE, when he and the legions returned for the third time to bludgeon Yehuda for wanting to be free of Roman persecution and subjugation. Lots of people hated Rome. In fact, everybody that was under the Roman yoke hated them, and everybody rose up against them. It was the Yehud and Yehuda that actually were the most effective at rising up against Rome. They took it to them, destroyed legions of Rome. But Rome decided that they would obliterate Jews, that they would also rename the land that had been Yehuda 1,000 years before Hadrian was there, way over 1,500 years before Hadrian was there. And he tortured Jews to death, wrapping Torah scrolls around them, soaking them in kerosene and setting them on fire, promising that he would douse the fire if they would tell him who was the most formidable enemy of Yehud. This was long before there was even a Jew on the planet. And under torture, some of them said the Philistines of old. So he said, okay, I hereby rename the Roman province of Yehuda Philistia Syria, or Syria Philistia. It was nothing but an insult. It was an ethnic slur. And the ethnic slur would have been forgotten if it wasn't for the fact that the British in particular have been and remain anti-Semites. And so they were the ones that continued the use of the ethnic slur. And so when the Balfour Declaration was written, it mentioned Palestine because the British were anti-Semitic. It's too bad because the British should have known better, because the Romans treated the Celts and Brits every bit as bad as they did the Jews. They should have known better, but they didn't. And so that's how it came to be, and had essentially been forgotten, other than when the Marxists and Muslims again, the Russian KGB, met in Cairo with the Muslim Brotherhood. And they, recognizing that they had lost the War of Independence, 1948, badly, and so they'd lost their claims, and they were planning on the next war, which became known as the Six-Day War. About that time is when they came up with the lie that we will rename the Muslims from many countries, primarily from Egypt and Jordan, that are in Israel. We'll rename them Palestinians, and we will call Israel Palestine, and we'll create the myth that these are the indigenous people and that Jews have booted them out of the land. We'll call it Nakba, day of terror and tragedy. It was all a lie. They knew it was all a lie. They ripped off a flag from Jordan. That's all it is. They ripped off. They took the star off the flag of the Jordanian people. They took scarf that they all love to wear now. That came from Iran. It's other people's cultural items. They ripped them off and paraded under this false flag, and they've repeated the lie so many times that, and it was promoted by Marxists and Muslims, that Marxists and Muslims still promote the same lie. And unfortunately, Jews have not been rational, moral, smart enough to repudiate the lie. And so when you read somebody here say that, no, it's, I checked my DNA, it says I'm a Palestinian. And, you know, Abraham, he didn't come from Canaan. He came from Babylon, from Ur. And you go, come on. How could you be so crazy? It's interesting, by the way, that the Canaanites actually weren't destroyed as an ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
There is a very high trace of Canaanite among the population in Lebanon. Now, that is not to say that their principal origin is Canaanite. Is not by a long shot. Lebanon was part of the Punic Empire, and so they were kind of outcast from the Greeks. The least literate of the Greeks, the ones that just couldn't make it in mainstream Greek society. They went to Phoenicia and they went to Carthage, and they became which we call the Punic people. And so the Lebanon is principally Punic or Phoenician, which would be kissing cousins to the Carthaginians. And the fact is that most of the Canaanites, which were a very small percentage of the population of the land, there were 12, 15 tribes there, they just left and migrated north.
Yeah, it's interesting how anthropologically they can go back and trace DNA that close, you know? I mean, because where's a starting point? I mean, I'm presuming that you have to have some sort of grave or archaeological site that is a known Canaanite, and you can get some DNA from that and say that, you know what I'm saying? But otherwise,
yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's really hard to do. And I think that this is I'm going to tell you what the mistake is. The Torah tells us that the Philistines came from Crete.
Mm-hmm.
It says they were Philistine actually means foreign terrorist. And
Palestine, yeah.
Philistine, it means foreign terrorist, invader. And it tells us they came from Crete. Nobody really paid any attention to that. You know, they were Cretans. But about 4 years ago, they found the first ever grave going back to with bones that date back to the 10th century BCE and to the 11th century BCE. And they were able to find enough material to do a DNA test on those bones. And it's been tough to find them because there are no, markers or burial markers. There's no buildings, there's no cities, there's no nothing. So, but they found them and they did DNA testing. So you have a book that part of the book was written a little under 3,000 years ago. And it tells you that the Philistines came from Crete. And so 4 years ago, finally, they actually found some skeletons of some dead Philistines and they did the DNA test. And where do you think they came from?
Crete. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. And that's what you call a credibility score right there.
Absolutely.
At that point, you just got to say, oh my, what are the odds that he got that one right? Now, as for the alleged Canaanite DNA in the people of southern Lebanon, the more likely scenario is that what they're actually monitoring is Punic or Phoenician DNA that was shared with the Carthaginians and that was spread around all of the coast of the Mediterranean. And they're finding that and they're just calling it Canaanite because you're not going to find actually a Canaanite grave and Canaanite DNA. It goes back too far. So it's just mislabeled Punic.
Yeah. Yeah, it was much like Pharaoh, the pronunciation of Pharaoh before the Rosetta Stone. I mean, it's right there in Torah.
Oh yeah,
I mean, how many
isn't that
times
amazing? Yeah, isn't it
we have to
amazing
get this?
Yeah, that Pharaoh is actually written out phonetically in Hebrew as Pharaoh, and it was written out and phonetically as in Hebrew as Pharaoh. Now 3,450 years ago, and the Rosetta Stone, what is it, 100 and some odd years old?
Right. Yeah.
No one knew how to pronounce the hieroglyphic language, and yet you read the phonetic language of Hebrew, and there it is, written out Pharaoh. And we actually have Dead Sea Scrolls copies of that portion of the Torah dating to the 2nd and 3rd century BCE, but 2,000 years before the Rosetta Stone.
It's all there. All we have to do is dig.
Yeah, it's even funny too that if you when you know the timing of the Exodus, which you can use the genealogy and the Torah to define the timing of the Exodus, it was 1447 BCE, and you look at the history of Egypt, it's Pharaoh Thutmose and Thutmose the Great, whose mommy was the first woman pharaoh of Hatshepsut of Egypt. He was co-regent, was a military general while she was co-regent. When she passed away, he became pharaoh. And it is, of course, interesting to note that of the pharaohs of that era, there's only one pharaoh who actually admits that his eldest son predisposed him.
Mm-hmm.
What are the odds of that? And by the way, because they only write things that are positive about them, it wouldn't even explain why his eldest son predisposed him, but did.
Right.
So 60 minutes here. This is I just think it's sick. This is a Ukrainian showing the drones that he is making. And he says that we have to count the number of everything. We have to be very prudent in the way that we deploy weapons and we manufacture weapons and that we kill Russians. But now we have this such that the cost to kill a Russian is under $1,000. So tell the world, you can kill a Russian for $1,000. It goes back to the realization that the Ukrainian war, and this is something that 80% of Americans, John, have been misled on. You ask 80% of Americans who started the Ukrainian war, they'll say Putin and Russia. It's not true, not even close to being true. America planned this war going back all the way to the 1950s and has been scheming on it ever since. And using the International Monetary Fund initially, which I reported on Shattering Myths. I did a whole series on what the coup that America led in the Ukraine for the purpose of switching out Russia to the International Monetary Fund was going to do to the cost of currency in the West, because the Ukrainians had a habit of never paying back their debt. And they run, it's the most graft-ridden government in any that part of the world, by far and away. And so there's no chance of getting the money paid back. The Russians had a guaranteed way because they ran pipelines through the Ukraine, and so they could just deduct it from the transit fees. America had no way. So what was America trying to do to lose a couple of $1 billion a year by taking over the financing of Ukraine and replacing by coup a pro-Russian government? And I knew this was going to spell trouble long before this war began. And then I knew George Bush quite well, and I knew when George Bush said that he was going to begin hosting all of the NATO games in Ukraine, which wasn't even a member of Russia, and then declaring Ukraine is going to become a member of Russia. We don't care that the Russians hate the idea. We don't even care that Secretary of State Baker before him had promised the Russians that NATO would not come any closer to Russia. And that was so that Russia said, we'll give up East Germany. We'll give up East Berlin. We'll allow Germany to be unified, even though the Germans killed 25 million Russians during the last war. That's a big give for us. And you, for that give, you promised that NATO will come no closer to Russia than it presently is. And there's been 20 nations added to NATO that are all closer to Russia.
Yeah, they definitely went against their word immediately.
Immediately and deliberately, and in a matter that is insanely corrupt. Then we led the coup, and before even we led the coup, we have Senators John McCain, who I knew personally, and Lindsey Graham, who I think is the ultimate scum of the earth, are bragging to Ukrainian Nazi units. They are neo-Nazi units that America is going to supply the weapons for them to attack the ethnic Russians in the east part of Ukraine, which would taunt the Russians to come in to protect them. And then supply even more weapons to kill Russians, because America wanted a proxy war with Russia because it was good for the military-industrial complex to break Russia apart and to seize their national resources. That is absolutely, unequivocally how we got into this war. And yet 80% of Americans blame Russia instead of the United States. That's, to me, is insanely aggravating when we do that kind of thing. And to realize that 2 million people have died because of these lies is even a greater stain on the world. And that it's continuing to go on. And that now you've got them bragging that we can kill a Russian for $1,000. So the Russians are in a position now where they really have no choice. Putin has been exceedingly restrained and not bringing the battle to Europe. But it's Europe that's funding them. It's Europe that's arming them. It's Europe that's giving them the targeting information. It's Europe that's running the weapon systems in Ukraine that are killing Russians. Russia can't allow them to pick off Russians $1,000 a Russian kill. And so the battle is going to come to Europe, and they have no defenses. And then what? And because now Zelensky, with his aggressiveness and bringing the war into Russia with bombing through these drones, Russian energy infrastructure. Russia has decided that the only way to respond to that in the short term is to use their most technically advanced missiles and to bomb Kiev into oblivion. And that's what they're doing right now. And the Ukrainians have found that American interceptors do not work against the most advanced Russian technologies. And they've deployed all of them, and America doesn't have any to spare anymore. They're taking them from the rest of the world. That's why the bases of America and the Arab dictatorships became so vulnerable. We robbed them of the interceptors. So Ukraine is without interceptors now. And they've ticked the Russians off. And the Russians are using drones and missiles at much higher levels. And they're going right after Kiev. People just don't think of what the consequences of their move. People were applauding what they're doing inside of Russia. It says, no, this is not good. The people are applauding what Europe is doing to the Russians. Says, no, this is not good. You have to understand what the natural consequence of all of this is. You need to think it through, cause and consequence. And the consequence is the destruction of Europe. And Europe doesn't have a military. And really, it has no military.
Mm-hmm.
Can't defend itself. Russia does. Russia's got military now of 2 million people. When the U.S. lured them into this war, there were 400,000, not very well equipped, and no real mechanism to support them. And the Russian economy was still teetering from the breakup of the Soviet Union. And now it's 2 million strong, all volunteer. 2 million strong. Now, I don't think you could muster 50,000 poorly trained, poorly equipped troops across Europe.
No.
Against 2 million with brilliant leadership, superior weapons, and what Europe doesn't have, a manufacturing base that is geared for supplying the drones, missiles, and artillery and other things that soldiers need. They're just not thinking of what the consequences of their actions are, that they're the cause of the Russian response, and that the Russian response has actually been restrained. But you can push people to the point where, you're not going to be restrained anymore. I'm a pretty passive guy to a lot of attacks. I'll just, mouth off at you and say, that was really stupid, not appreciated, you're an idiot. And I'll just continue to respond to you with words, as Russia has done. But you can push me to the point where I'll respond beyond words. You can continue to antagonize somebody or threaten them or those they love to the point where they have to respond. And that's what's happening with Russia and in Europe. And so the other day we were talking about what are the consequences, I think it was yesterday from the Rainbow Studio, what are the consequences of the Ukrainian sending European drones and missiles into Russia. And my view is that Russia is going to respond by attacking Europe. And Europe has no defenses. And Europe is insane right now. How are they going to respond?
Yeah.
And they could escalate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole world's clamoring now for nukes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't believe they've always been tiptoeing around for the last couple of years about Ukraine joining the EU, which is a purely economic thing because NATO is the military treaty, right?
Right.
And what does Ukraine have that is the interest of any European nation? That we would absorb their debt and
yes.
and everything that.
So before the war, they were the most debt-ridden, graft-ridden country in the region.
Mm-hmm.
And so dealing with them economically was suicide unless you were the Russians and you had a pipeline that you can tap the transit fees. And now it's 100 times worse.
Mm-hmm.
To tie yourself economically into Ukraine is to bankrupt what is already bankrupt. So there's just no incentive. At one point they were the breadbasket of that part of the world, but that's not necessarily so anymore. And everything else is broken. And I think that it's inevitable that the Russians are going to control Odessa. And when the Russians control Odessa, then Ukraine is a rump state and it's landlocked. And so how are you going to ship out grain?
Ship out grain? They can't get their tractors into the fields because they're all full of fiber optic cable and drones.
It's true.
I mean, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great tragedy what's going on, and there's so little understanding of this story, and even less understanding of what this does to the world going forward. And the Torah and Devarim, Deuteronomy, when the Torah announces the arrival of the Nakri, it says that the world devolves back into the conditions that were experienced in Sodom and Gomorrah. And it says that because of the belligerence of the people, that they will end up suffering from what is essentially fire from the sky, brimstone. And the only way to explain something of that nature would be nuclear war. So I think it's likely.
Yeah, that's the reason why the United States isn't mentioned. I mean, other than Tarshish and where the Rahab comes from and all of that.
And Isaiah 18, which tears us to ribbons. I mean, Isaiah in the 18th chapter describes America in every which way, and it's really unflattering.
But when it comes to the very end, we're not really meant, because we're not here. We're not a force anymore. No. We're crashed back into, just trying to stay alive in the United States. Same thing with, Yeah,
but part of that too is that God only talks about nations that are having a positive or negative influence on Israel. Of course, it's mostly negative.
Right.
America's talked about because right now it is the great betrayer of Israel. And so there's a lot of present day prophecy that is being fulfilled right before our eyes with Rahab and America's betrayal of Israel. So a lot. But as you go deeper into the 7 years of Israel's troubles, you see that changes, and the principal foe is Iran.
Trying to find you have a post on it here. I want to roll down to.
No, that's okay. Join the Abraham Accords. So what do? They push him with the symbol of the President of the United States and put him in Jerusalem on the Temple Mount with all of the dictatorial heads of state of the Muslim nations all sitting around and genuflecting to the great dumpster, lecturing behind the symbol of the President of the United States on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Israel, saying they need to join the Abraham Accords. Now, what's really interesting is the site that published this is a Christian site. And saying, if you're trying to sell the world on all coming together and forming one covenant, wouldn't that make you the Antichrist?
That's what.
So it's just interesting. This is a Christian site, and Christians are the reason that Trump is president. If it wasn't for Christians, he wouldn't be president. MAGAs are overwhelmingly Christian, and they're saying that the Christians we elected the Antichrist, and he's trying to make a covenant with Muslims. They have no idea that there was no Christ, of course, and they want to cite the book of Revelation, and it's a really bad job of plagiarizing. And the book that it plagiarizes the most was inspired by Satan, Ezekiel. Well, I don't know. Is it okay being somewhat right for the wrong reasons, or is that's just worse than not even playing?
No, because it gives you that veneer that hey, well, the clock was right one time a day. you know, and so then that's where I'm going to go back for the rest of my material, because it was right once, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So
Yeah, look
no,
at the
it's worse.
skyline
It's
behind
worse.
the Dome of the Rock too. That is United Arab Emirates and Qatar and
Mhm.
Dubai and that sort of thing. And they've got
AI did
the minaret from the Alaska Mosque sitting right next to the Dome of the Rock. And they've
right.
got
I say AI
whitewashed
did a real
limestone
good getting
buildings
everything.
there, in front. So, but it created an illusion
Yeah.
that is unreal. And when you do that, I think you're being nothing but misleading.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I was reading down everything that they were talking about there. I was like, huh, somebody's been reading Ethsara, I think.
Mm. Yeah, we absolutely.
We've been
proved
talking
it.
about this for over a year, so folks, you're a little behind on.
Yeah, when we thumb up, we'll do one more. This is the picture that I wrote the whole story of what the Iranians did, what America did, and then America just flat out lied about it. We said we were in a defensive, strictly a defensive strike. We didn't violate the ceasefire, when in fact the shots weren't even at American ships. They weren't even at commercial ships, and the U.S. attack was at a uninvolved party, and so the U.S. was aggressive. And the whole U.S. story doesn't hold together, because if what the U.S. claimed was true, that they were attacked, then they can't have won the war and destroyed their military. And yet the truth is they weren't attacked, and therefore it wasn't defensive.
Yeah. Not only not
look
getting
at-
your story straight, can't keep your lies straight.
Can't keep
because
your lies
you're-
straight. Yeah, this is an interesting post here. Just recently, they found on the side of some clay. It's a letter from a general involved in the defense of Yehuda, and he is watching Jerusalem burn, and he is pleading for reinforcements so that he can defend his community from the Babylonians. And the Jews were in this position because we weren't Jews at that point, but they were Yehud. Were in that position because they had, against the advice that Yahweh had offered them through their prophets, they had provided tribute to Egypt, saying that Egypt would protect them from Babylon. And the prophet says, "Don't do that. That's really stupid. You want protection? Do what Hezekiah did. Don't go down this road." But they did nonetheless, and so they're watching it burn. So this would have been 6th century BCE, writing in Hebrew. Writing in Hebrew about Yehuda being attacked by what became the Persians, the Babylonians, in the 6th century BCE. That happens to be 5 centuries after the last Philistine was gone. So it can't have been Palestine, could it? No. And this was 11 centuries, 1,100 years before the first Muslim existed. Before rabbis sold Muhammad Talmud stories to create the Quran. So it couldn't have been Islamic, could it?
No.
So if you're a Marxist and you're promoting Palestine shall be free, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
When you're talking about the Jews being occupiers, occupying what, of their own land? Are you an occupier when you walk into your own home?
No.
No. So it's just, and there's not just this writing. You look at the Mishnah Stone. The Mishnah Stone dates to the 9th century BCE, and it specifically mentions King Dod, correctly spelling his name as King Dod, and it mentions Yahweh as his God, and it talks about Mishnah, who is brought up prominently in the prophetic account, and it talks about how disgusting Mishnah was. He actually burned his own son alive as a sacrifice to their gods, and the Israelites became so disgusted seeing what he did. They said, we don't want any part of this. They just left. They didn't finish the battle. They just left. They were so disgusted. And the Mishnah stone, I think it's in Jordan today, but you can see pictures of it anywhere. Written in a variation of the Hebrew script about all of these events. Going back to the 9th century BCE and King Daud and Yahweh, and this was Yisrael. Pretty hard to make a claim for Palestine and Palestinian and Muslims, isn't it? Unless you're stupid.
Yeah, the Mount, what is it, Mount Hebel? What is the
the Mount Hebel. The Mount Hebel. On Mount Hebel, right around 1400 BCE, the Exodus was over. It had been a miserable experience for God and for everybody, particularly for Moshe, but it was finally over. And they were entering the Promised Land with Yosha ben Nun. And Yahweh's instructions were to reinforce the importance of listening to what Moshe had revealed in the Torah. To go on either side of the valley as they were entering the Promised Land, having crossed the Jordan River. And from one of these sides was the Hebel side, to echo what would happen if they ignored the Torah instructions. The other side to say, if we observe and respond favorably to these instructions in the Torah, we will be blessed beyond all people of the earth. And the other side says, if we reject these instructions of Yahweh in the Torah, we'll be cursed. And so they had this yelling match back and forth from the tops of the two mountains. They just broke the community in two to reinforce this so that the ears heard that it's important that we pay attention to these instructions because this land is given to us as a gift. And the last thing we want to do is to tick off the God who has given us this land as a gift. Therefore, he's given us some instructions. Listen to what he said and act responsibly, and we are going to be the most blessed people on the planet. Ignore what he has to say, respond negatively to him, become religious instead, we're going to be cursed. And so on Mount Ebal, we were told in the Torah that there was an altar that was built to commemorate the day and all of this. We were given the dimensions of it. And so they found it. And the first group started sifting through the rubble, found some really interesting artifacts that date back to the time. But then there was a second group that went in and said, we're going to be much more careful. We're going to wet sand all of this, wet sieve all of this. And so they began to wet sieve it, and they found two things that the others had missed right there. One was an amulet that was devoted to a very interesting fellow. Did I mention a pharaoh earlier? Thutmose the Great.
Right.
The amulet was of Thutmose the Great.
Wonder where that came from.
Yeah, wonder what that affirms. It was an amulet to Thutmose the Great. And the other was this. I think it was silver. I don't know if it's lead or
lead.
silver.
Yeah, it was the lead tablet.
Okay, lead.
Yeah.
Lead tablet. And it had been folded over. It's about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches, and it had been folded over. And you could take pictures at various angles, but also you could have it scanned with all sorts of modern equipment. And they had it scanned, and they will show you the scans. I've shared the scans. And on those scans, there's about 25 or 30 Hebrew letters. And some are repeated multiple times. When we redid our Torah, Yada Torah, which we're calling it, our ancient script, it was written in that script. And so I used that as a means to adapt a older version, a more accurate version of that script. And I am dying to tell you one of the things I got wrong that I have to redo is that, I've told you that the biggest lesson of all was that our original thought that, because everybody calls the LF a ox's head.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that is, how do you know the ox is castrated? It's a bull. A bull, a castrated bull is an ox. So why are you calling it an ox's head? What
Right.
about that picture of the head and the yoke tells you that the bull has been castrated? I said, so it's a bull's head. It has a little bit of a pointed nose, so that would indicate it could also be a ram, but the horns are wrong for a ram and the yoke is wrong for a ram. So we're going to say it's both a ram and principally a bull. And so that was an interesting lesson. And then I tried to resize all of the other letters, like the doorway was always a little squatty thing, but it's a doorway. You can't have the man standing tall and the doorway being at ankle level. So I started, we'll try to size things. The Teth, which is the last letter in the Hebrew language, the 22nd of 22, has always been drawn very similar to the corrupted Christian version of the Roman crucifixion stake. The Roman crucifixion stake was not one of these. The crossbar set on top so that it could be reused. You never removed the upright post. Wood was too valuable, and so they didn't throw it away. The upright, and it was too hard to get out of the ground. They cut a recess in the limestone. They put that upright post in. What they did then is they nailed the victim's wrist to that cross beam, but the cross beam went on top of the post, and so there was a nipple on the post and a recess on the cross beam, so they just sit one into the other, and that's so it was like a capital T. But this image was like the stupid Christian rendition of it as the lowercase t. And it just looked, I hate a letter that looks like a cross. So, the dead God on a stick thing is way too irritating to me. I didn't realize what the dadgun thing is. It's not a cross. And we call it a signature, but a signature is this. It's an X.
Right.
No one ever does a signature like that. So it's not a
Make
signature.
your mark. Right.
Yeah, it's not make your mark. You know what the thing is? It's a tree.
A tree. Yep.
It's a tree. And once you realize it's a tree and you see where it is used, like in Torah, where God says, I'm going to provide knowledge for my people, he's always using the tree. And so he's saying it's the tree of knowledge. It's a tree. That's where it all ends. The Hebrew alphabet ends. It begins with the bull and ends with the tree.
With the tree.
Yeah. So I made a mistake when doing it, because what I did is I realized that it was going to look better if we had letters that had different amplitude. If you look at English writing, people never think about this, but there's letters like the lowercase b, the stem goes above the line. If you look at the J, the hook goes below the line. The K, you've got a part that goes above a certain line. That most English letters, not most, but a high percentage of them, either go above or below the line. A P goes below the line. And so in Hebrew, the only other Paleo-Hebrew we had was just all over the place, things high, low, but made no sense. So we said, let's calibrate everything. It's a plow, then it has to be down low. If it's a man, the feet are on the line, not below the line, but it's standing up tall. If it's a door, it has to be a similar height. Let's make all of these letters so we don't have to change font size, which we had to do every time we were presenting the others, because you had to render some at 0.8 and some at 14 to have them look good together. Let's get them so that they are a typed font. Let's get them keyed to the proper letters on the typewriter. Let's have the hey be the hey. Let's have the LF be the A. Let's have the ain, which is an I, be the I on the computer. So it's natural to write them out. But I said, God, I really hate that damn cross. And of course, they're not written with a bias line. So
Right.
I was trying to decide what I should have done is put the bottom of the line on the line, just like the person, and it sits up as tall as the person, and then it looks like a tree. But we actually lowered it. Shouldn't have done that. Live and learn. You know,
Right.
I think we improved virtually every letter, and I think that one we actually made. I don't know if we made it worse, but we didn't. We certainly didn't improve it. But at least now I figured out
Didn't
what the
do
name
any
of it is.
justice, right?
Yeah, but that's
Yeah.
the fun part, John. You know, is
Mhm.
is knowing that God does not start with a data dump. You look
Yeah,
at Moshe. Moshe revealed more than anybody else. He didn't start him with a data dump, did he?
No,
He
definitely
learned on
not.
learned on the job. Dode is his favorite guy. Dode didn't start with a data dump. So nobody had a data dump. So why would we begin that process now? The whole process is learning. And you look at every one of the prophets; they all made mistakes. Part of the whole ability to show that you're worthy is you make a mistake, you learn from it, you go on from there. You trip and fall, you get back up, and you go, and you can demonstrate that you've got grit, you got character.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. I mean, I don't know anybody who hasn't had a bad time a time or two, right? It's kind of how we respond to those things that defines us.
I would tell you that if somebody came to me and they said that everything in my life has been perfect, every girl I asked out, she couldn't wait to go out with me. No girl ever told me no. That every job that I interviewed for, I got. That I was the best player on every one of my sports teams. That I got straight A's all the way through school. That there was no challenge in my life. My life was just easy because everything fell in place. Because I was right about everything. And somebody were to, first you'd think they're delusional. But the second thing is that's a person that's never been tested. And
For
you
sure.
would never want to test somebody that hasn't, you trust somebody who has never been tested. I'd
Yeah, you
much
definitely
prefer
need to experience the difficulty of that.
Yeah. And you want to be also cautious, like we love Matt with cats. And Matt has been the lowest of the low. He has shown that it is possible to overcome a heroin addiction. That's very few people survive that. And not only to live a productive life and to be loved and to show that life can have meaning and make a real contribution and get out of himself. And he has done that and has contributed mightily. That's a person that you say he has proven that we can trust him. So I think that overcoming challenges is what we're looking for. Now, I'm not suggesting that somebody should go do drugs so we can prove that they can beat them. I think that would be a really bad idea. And even with someone like Matt, you always want to know that the lure sucked him in at one point in his life. And if things start going south, you want to be there quickly to get him out of his own head to make certain he doesn't go back to that. Because the lure can draw people in. There can be lots of triggers. Trigger is a terrible thing when you've been addicted to any number of different things. You can be addicted to online games.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to what you're saying there. There's a lot of different things that can be going on with people that are kind of pulling their attention away from whatever would be the most beneficial.
Yes. Yeah. You're a very different person than is Matt. I like, everybody loves Matt, and Matt has a natural following because he is so out of himself now and so into finding something positive to say about everybody.
Yeah, his positivity is infectious.
It is. It's absolutely infectious, and we all love it. And his smile and just every bit of who he is and his huge contribution. You're very thoughtful. You're not somebody who is trying. There's almost nothing about you that says, "I want people to like me." It's far more. I want to be thoughtful and right. I'd like to show that I've thought this through, that I've been exposed, that I took the time, and that this resonates with me, and that there's credibility here, and I want to show it.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. Like growing up, I was compared to a lot of people, and I didn't really like that. It was like I don't want to be anybody else. I want to be me. Why
Mm-hmm.
isn't that just a thing that's cool? So I've never really
Mm-hmm.
cared about much what people think about me in that regard. Obviously, the people I care about, I kind of care what they think because there's a reason that they're important to me, and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, what I really like about this, everything about this, is that we kind of get to be who we are and learn along the way, and get to do our own thing, and being kind of individualistic to some regard, but also while we all have the same foundation.
Yeah, it's for me. It is so much more enjoyable. What I think ultimately is productive. And I realized that you were right that for the first 10 years that I communicated, I was anonymous, and I'm not anonymous anymore. Yahweh won't have that. And with lack of anonymity comes responsibility. And so I feel a tremendous responsibility for how are we going to continue to manage this and to grow and to make certain that we're doing what Yahweh wants and preparing people for their ongoing responsibilities. And when I encounter someone like you, who is so different than others, and I think different in a very positive way. I mean, I feel really I feel energized by you, comfortable with you, and inspired by your intellect. And
Thank you.
approach.
I appreciate that.
So I am really drawn to you, and I realize that as different as you are from everybody else that we've had on this program. I mean, listen, that there are no dummies in the covenant, so everybody's smart, and everybody is well read. Everybody, to a person, well read, very smart, knows their material, and is passionately committed to it. But even within that realization, you offer some really unique gifts. And I think that this is precisely what Yahweh was trying to achieve. He's not looking for a lot of people, but he is looking for people who are unique, who all have something they can contribute. That's why I think that whole notion of perfect is so stupid, because if you were all perfect, then they would be like you or Kevin, whoever's going to be the paradigm for perfect. They'd be like that perfect person because they're going to be just like Rich. And you realize,
just like Rich.
They're just like Rich.
Who's got a bad attitude right now?
So, yeah, who's not so perfect. And okay, there are no perfect people. There never been as a perfect person. And you even look at the people that God has worked with; they are really, really, really flawed. Abraham, super flawed. Jacob, unbelievably flawed. Chawa, boy, terribly, terribly flawed. Abraham, flawed. Yishak, flawed. Jacob, flawed. Dode, flawed. And so everybody's flawed. And so we realize God's obviously not looking for perfection because there is no perfection. But if we were perfect, we'd all be the same.
Yeah, for sure. Nobody wants to be these kind of cookie cutter shapes. It's
no, and
very
the
limiting.
Cookie cutter shapes, it would be so boring for Yahweh. Why? You could have one of them, but the moment you made a second, why bother?
Yeah.
And a third,
and they couldn't
useless.
Couldn't interact. What would be the point of interaction? Because I know exactly what you're thinking because I'm perfect. So it's what you're thinking, what I'm thinking. Yeah, because we're both perfect, right? Yeah.
It's 10 plus 10 is 1. If we're all the same, 10 plus 10 is 1.
Yeah. It's kind of like talking to like an ideologue, like whether they're a Marxist or a Nazi or whatever. Like you can typically predict what they're going to say before they say it. You know what I mean? Because they are those little cookie cutter cutouts.
Yes. I mean, I did not know that you were going to play into all of my favorite themes, but you did. I mean, you managed to play into all the themes that I've been harping on now for 25 years. And it's because, and nobody else has brought up any one of those themes, because you're not cookie cutter. 1 plus 1 can be 10, or 10 plus 10 can be 1. And if we're unique, then 1 plus 1 is 10. And it gets back to you have a very different approach to the show you're promoting. And what I said to you before we began is that while I did watch yours, I made very few comments, and I will make very few comments going forward, because if I'm making comments and I said, yeah, I really liked what you did there, and I go to somebody else and I don't comment, or I say, I think you could improve on this, then I'm making cookie cutters.
Yeah,
right?
I've been thinking about that quite a bit recently. Right. So it's very exciting.
A lot of mini yadas. That is the thing I'm trying to avoid. What I'm trying to say is, I'll be me, you be you.
Yeah,
I gave you the tools and the education needed to go off and be you and make a contribution. And we have the website and everything to do it. And we have tutors like Kevin here and Rich that say, here's the right tools to use. Go off and contribute and make your own unique contribution. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was about to say too, is that you gave us this amazing tool set and wealth of knowledge to learn from. And last couple of weeks, you've been really throwing the gauntlet down. You've been like, hey, you want to be part of this? Come and show that. You know, and I took that very personally.
And you should. That is, I know that there is, particularly as we approached this Shabuah, which I had made very clear was not going to be a harvest. It was going to be the start of Israel's troubles, and that is next Shabuah. And then the next thing I wanted to say is, if you were fixated on this being your vacation, you're the wrong place. Mm-hmm. The vacation is short. It's very few people. And we're talking about a world that's going to destroy itself, and God's people that are going to enter the worst time in their history, and they're being suicidal. If your interest is in yourself as opposed to helping those people, you're just in the wrong place. You're a net negative. And then on the positive side, what I wanted to say is that since there was consternation of, I'm going to make it or not make it for a lot of people, I can say, I can tell you what you need to do to know the answer. So you're not wondering. You can know the terms and conditions of the covenant. You can accept those. You can attend the Moed Mikre. But if you want to know, contribute.
For sure.
It's simple.
It's interesting because it's something that a lot of people have kind of freaked out a little bit about. You read people's comments or talk to people, you kind of get that vibe, right? And I don't know, the way I look at it is, I think it's kind of similar to one thing Matt said the other day, is that it doesn't really matter so much if you go along for the ride, whether you're taking a jet or you're taking the bus. If everybody's lining up at the same destination, all you have to really worry about is having your ticket with you.
Mm-hmm. Know where you're going. Be on that, going the right direction for the right reason, with the right group of people. And so
I'm taking the jet. Just so we're clear, I'm taking the jet. I'm not a public transportation guy at all. So yeah, I want to go fast, and I want to get there, and I want to do what needs to get done when we get there. So
yeah, and I'm on the jet. In my case, I want to own the jet and fly the jet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. And I may want to own and fly the jet and take it to the boat. And I may want to run the boat. I may want to run the boat too, because I like doing stuff like that. And you have to always. God is not monotonous. If all we had 24/7 is to share the insights of the Torah, our lives would even become monotonous. We have to have lives beyond this life. Leah worked. We make a contribution to this. She's coming back today from Florida. The first thing we're going to do is not talk Torah. We talk a lot of Torah, but that won't be the first thing that comes to mind. We have to have lives that have other interests, other we're not bringing anything into the equation. So we should pursue these kinds of things. We should take our own approach to them and make a contribution. But I can tell you, there's a reason we have been on fire recently. And I mean that in a very literal sense, glowing and moving from matter to energy, is that understanding is happening at a prodigious rate. We're understanding Torah so far beyond what we had even dreamed possible 5 years ago. And what we are learning is what actually happened in the garden, what Yahweh's response was it to, and why we're going back to the garden. And when you realize that, and then you realize who he has chosen to deploy to get us from there to here, it all boils down to a very simple equation. Listen, learn, think, respond, engage, endure.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's
if you
really
if you
fundamental.
Fundamentally, if you take any one of those steps out, it doesn't work. You got to listen to what God has to say. You have to learn from it. You can't just go in one ear and out the other. You got to learn from it. You have to think about it. You then, based upon what you've heard and thought about, you need to respond appropriately. You need to engage. God, every step of the way, he is saying, I want you to help. I want you to assist. I want you to work. Because he values work. That's why I've been so against AI. It's robbing people of the two things that make them human. Work, which gives you a sense of worth. You've built something, you've created something, you've added something, you've made something. And thinking. We can discern right and wrong, good and bad, productive, counterproductive. AI is robbing a generation of these two things, and that is catastrophic. So you need to be able to think about it and then do something. And there's a lot of things you can do. And one of the things I keep on trying to say, and it's essential to what Yahweh has to convey to us. I was just writing this about Ezraki's name. Ezraki's name is based on Ezra, which means to give, to assist, to serve, to work, to help. That the moment we view others as more important than ourselves, we're actually increasing our own value. And you can never be depressed if your focus is on helping others. It's the fastest way to serve yourself, is to help of others, and you can never be depressed, and your life will always matter when you're doing that. And so it became really obvious that's part of God's agenda. He picked people that will devote themselves to helping others, teach them, guide them, lead them, set as an example for them, support them. But also, God realizes that for him to take us from bodies to Or, which is where you began with Yahweh and me so long ago, he is empowering us to what the equation would say is E equals mc squared. So the square of the speed of light, which is it should not be looked at as specifically a number of 300,000 meters per second, but should instead be looked at as a concept. The speed of light is the underpinning of the universe. It is the reason of the universe. It's the very essence of the universe. The universe is really based upon the speed of light. It is fundamental to the existence of the universe. And when you realize that transition between matter and energy means that matter and energy are the same thing, different amounts of the same thing, and God is taking us up the ladder to energy, we could be disastrous if we don't listen, think, and respond appropriately. And if we don't learn from our mistakes but double down on them, there is no way God can trust us with that kind of empowerment. And so he has a responsibility to have a filter to make certain that the people who make it to that point are people that he can trust. And you can't do that simply by being intake. If your entire mode is I'm going to listen, I'm going to think, I'm going to intake this information, all positive, but you don't have some way of showing that you can process it and make a contribution and give something back, he doesn't have any way to know if you can be trusted or not. And until you stumble and fall and get back up, he doesn't know what you're made of. And he needs to know that to empower you to the degree that we're going to be. I'm quite comfortable that going forward in time, we're off exploring some planetary system around some star in a faraway galaxy. that when we decide to manipulate DNA and to do stuff there, and to create that environment that's conducive to life, and the three of us are there, Rich too, none of us are going to do something that's stupid. We're going to be responsible. We're going to have fun, but we'll be responsible.
It kind of makes me think of something I think you mentioned with you and Kevin were talking about yesterday on the vlog, is that there's definitely a difference between making a mistake out of, say, ignorance or of selfishness. You know what I mean? I expect that while we'll have kind of exceedingly more responsibility in the next dimension, so to speak, I would think that if we're to be like we are, there may be some room for some minor mishaps once in a while. But
I agree. There will be.
It's got to be room for us to grow. But yeah,
right,
I think
absolutely.
as long as we keep the correct perspective, that's really the most important thing.
When the tree reappears in the garden for 1,000 years, it isn't going to be the tree of good. It's going to be the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When Yahweh writes the Torah inside of us, it isn't just going to be the cliff notes of the good parts. Mm-hmm. You have no appreciation for what's good if you don't know what's bad.
For sure, and I guess that kind of comes around back to the idea of being complete, right, with the knowledge of good and evil, and there's really no other way to kind of be evaluated unless you have both.
Yep. Well, gentlemen, I have a wife that is arriving. I have promised that I was going to pick her up at the airport. I'm going to.
Oh, don't be late for that.
I'm going to do so. I could talk with you all day. I've had a marvelous time. I'm sorry we had a little problem with our camera, but we'll get her dialed in, because these little cameras have been spectacular. So we don't know why this one went rogue on us, but it did, and we'll dial her in and we'll get it better. But well, it takes pictures so you have an idea as to the new setup here, because it really is vastly better. And we're now in a situation where I can close the blue glass doors that separate this office and every bit of the equipment, except this microphone, which sits on a stand, which now has a little drawer that I set it into that's 3 feet from here. It all goes protected inside from wind and rain. And we don't have to do anything to open the studio up or to shut it down when it's done. And we can come out here and broadcast whenever we want. So huge improvements, and we just dial in the technology. It's never easy. If it were easy, any idiot could do it, as I've said in the past. So we've got to have some challenges to overcome, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, John, for being part of the program. Thank you for being part of the Covenant family. Thank you for proving me wrong.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I like to admit the wrong.
Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, my pleasure, my thrill. You're a good man. I appreciate you.
I look forward to next time if you want to have me back again.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You're great.
Awesome.
Yeah,
thank you.
Just personally, your personality and your intellect and your very logical approach to things, it's very comfortable to play off of. Yeah, so I like it. It's fun. One reason Kevin getting along, maybe there's something about that site that you guys went to that.
Kevin and I have a lot of overlap. It's funny. The more I talk to Kevin over the last year or so, I learn little things about him. He learns little things about me, and it's like, we're interested in that, and it's kind of funny. The more he and I talk, we end up finding similarities.
Yeah, Kevin has become the glue that keeps us all together. You have to have a Kevin to make it work. And he is that catalyst. He is that glue. He is he's as essential as anybody is to this family. So he's genuinely appreciated. And boy, nobody works harder. Well, there are some people that do work harder, but the people that work harder have no other lives other than what we do, and that's okay too. As I said the other day, I finally got to the point where it was convenient to surrender my will. I just said, okay, I've had a great life. I've enjoyed the choices I've made. Good choices have bad choices, but ultimately choices ended up here. I also have a life where there's 1,000 things that could have gone different and we wouldn't be here. So, I also feel like those steps prepared and directed me to this place. But it just finally seemed like, really, what decision would I want to make going forward? There's a time maybe we'll say, okay, I'll take my free will back and we'll go have some fun. But right now, it just okay. You're gonna okay. Our little girl has to do her business outside, so I'm going to sign off. But anyway, it's been fun. We'll definitely have you back.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been it's an amazing time. Thank you.
Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.